Hi guys. I recently just finished year 12 and by that I mean like I just got home from the last day of school like an hour ago. I would just like to talk about lock-in culture and the complicated emotions that it makes me feel. Also, when I talk about lock-in culture, I'm primarily talking about studying or revision, because I think that is the aspect of lock-in culture that, had a firm grasp on me and my character. To start things off a little bit personal, I think I first started locking in when I was doing my GCSEs. I actually didn't really lock in to improve myself as a person for my own good. Well, I kind of did, but not really. I mainly did it as a distraction from some really personal traumas that had affected me so bad that I used studying as a sort of distraction from it all. Because I had been studying harder than ever before because of what had happened to me, I managed to set myself this sort of really high standard that I didn't know that I could do. If it wasn't for that trauma that I experienced, if it wasn't for me making the decision to use studying of all things as a coping mechanism, I might not even have been studying the topics that I'm actually really happy with today. I'm genuinely really glad that I got the grades that I got. And I found it engaging because of the way that I used it, because I used it as a coping mechanism. But now, as I'm actually healing from that trauma, I'm finding less and less of a reason to actually lock in, or at least that's how it was, I think roughly during the start of sixth form, probably. And you see, before my GCSEs, before I actually did lock in, I never had a sort of goal that I wanted to have in my life. I was definitely more of a sort of, I'm just going to do my best and then see where that lands me kind of gal. And so when I got this actual idea to go to a specific uni at a specific place, studying a specific course, that's when I had, way more of a reason to lock in as well. That is what made me so driven to actually put the effort into my studies, because I know that, okay, well, if I know that this is where I want to go, and I know that this is what I need to do it, and so I'm going to do it. I wish that was how motivation worked, I really do. But when you set yourself a certain goal after not really having any sort of goal, you become really fixated on that goal. You think, if I don't reach that goal, what am I actually working towards? Who am I going to really be as a person if I don't do this thing that I've always wanted to do? And because of the sort of grip that it has on you, you start becoming less focused on anything else in your life, really. I had to become a lot more distant with my boyfriend, who obviously I love dearly, but I just could not handle being in like a really active relationship as well as trying to get into a Russell Group university. So now we're getting to the actual culture of locking in. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure when it really started as a trend to try and improve yourself to be the best person you could possibly be, or do the most things the most efficient way, the ways that are going to improve yourself the most, to impress the most people. I'm not exactly sure when that started, but I do have a theory as to why it started. I think it's because of COVID-19 and what we were really just doing back then. And I know that linking this to COVID probably seems a bit far-fetched given how long ago that really was. However, in COVID times when we were all just in our houses, I think we sort of gave up on education a little bit for a while. I mean, I know I certainly did. I mean, I was in year 7 when that happened, so I couldn't really do anything about that. So then a couple years later, COVID's basically over, and that was when we really started to actually get plunked into the real world again. Most of us were starting secondary school or starting high school when COVID-19 started to die down. It was such a transition into the real world, and we suddenly got engulfed into the idea of, okay, I need to improve myself as fast as I can because I've just been shoved here into, a place where I have to, you know, be so independent and I have to work for myself. I can't rely on, you know, other people anymore. There was very much a sense of, I'm doing this for me, I'm working for me, and I'm not gonna let anybody else work for me. I'm not gonna be so dependent on people anymore. You become so independent to the point where you can't accept help from other people, and that's when we need to stop and like think about what we're doing. There were, you know, a couple of times when I started to really lock in, like at the start of sixth form, at the start of year 12, when I like had to lock in, I felt as if any sort of help that was given to me by, you know, whether that was from like another student who knew the subject better than me, or whether that was like from a teacher, or whether that, you know, just any form of help that was offered, I felt like I needed to shove it away, because I thought it would be way better if I were to just, you know, look at my achievement and say, oh, I did this, all of me, like this was something that I built from the ground up and I didn't need anybody else. And again, that's when we have to sort of to take a step back, I think. Now that, like, again, I've just finished year 12 and I'm only starting to realize that it's okay if you need help. It's okay to raise your hand and admit, I'm actually sort of piss poor at this subject. I mean, I wish that's what I did, especially with certain A-level subjects like history. I wasn't very good at history. I've just gotten the results back from the mocks, and I think it's also the way in which we lock in that's really important. I think that there can be essentially two ways of locking in to really try and improve yourself. I think that you can either reward yourself for doing good or punish yourself for doing bad. Or you can do a bit of both, whatevs. But those are the two main approaches to locking in, I think. I made this Pinterest board of like study motivation. Actually no, it was labeled like really straightforwardly. It was literally labeled toxic study motivation. Literally all it was like really sort of arguably motivational, but to a core really harsh reasons to revise. I remember there was this one, it was like a whisper, and it said like, your laziness is disrespectful to the people who believe in you. You know, stuff like that. And I think, again, it's when we start really degrading ourselves for not studying. I think that's when we need to have a bit of a switcheroo. I think we need to actually focus on what we have done and praise ourselves for what we have done then. I've recently come across this sort of revision method where, well, not method, but revision approach, where you gamify it. You give yourself XP for certain like revision tasks that you've done. You give yourself points for different ways of revision that you've done, and it all adds up, and like you get to reward yourself for different amounts of XP that you've earned. I think that's very nifty. I think that's very cool. I made it on Notion. I flippin' love Notion, by the way. I might do like a Notion tour, maybe, if people would like, if I want to do that. Another thing about locking culture, I think, is like watching other people lock in and getting so engulfed in the fact, like you look at somebody locking in and you think, oh my days, why am I not doing that? Why am I not locking in? Why am I not like studying as hard as they are? They're gonna get it and I'm not, because they're studying and I'm not. And again, there's two ways to approach this. You can either get like positively inspired by them, where it's like, oh my gosh, this person's working so hard and I'm gonna be like them, I'm gonna do that too, or I'm gonna do something similar to that. Or you could say, I'm worse than this person for not doing what they're doing. They're doing something better than me, and therefore I am worse than them. Comparison is the thief of joy, and whatevs. You know, let's keep that in mind. That quote, comparison is the thief of joy, is genuinely really difficult to think about when, you know, you're in a classroom, you're in a sixth form, and you feel as if literally everybody is doing better than you. There's a sort of sense of, why can't I do it if they can? If they can get, you know, good grades without studying so much, why can't I do that? Why is my brain not built like that? Why do they have such motivation to study and I don't? It's not fair. And it's not fair. You know, some people's brains literally just do that. Some people, no, literally, some people just like sit there in class and then they listen and then it gets into their heads. Fuck off. No, what I'm trying to say is it's really hard to not compare yourself to others when you're surrounded by people to compare yourself to. And I'm not just talking about like in class, I mean like on social media. That's what this whole thing is about. So like locking in culture on social media. If you like genuinely want to improve yourself in the best ways possible and have an actual, you know, softer approach to doing that, that's brilliant. I mean, you're able to like actually see, you know, what are the gaps that you need to fill in your life like as a person, and if you're like actively working to, you know, fill in those gaps, good for you, like genuinely great. But if you look at yourself and you think there's something fundamentally wrong with me and I'm gonna stop at nothing until I can improve it or make sure that it reaches perfection, that is another thing that I like to talk about. The difference between practice makes perfect and practice makes progression. I think really knowing the difference in that is really what gives us an actual standard for revision, if that makes sense. I'm not a perfect student, okay? I'm gonna say this outright, and I don't mean this in a sort of like self-degrading way, or I mean this like wholeheartedly. I'm not a smart student, okay? Genuinely, I don't have a good brain for memorization. I need to like really force myself to remember things over and over again in order to actually get it into my head. And you know what, that's fine. That's made me realize I'm not a perfect student. You know, I'm not. Some people might see themselves as perfect students. You know what, good for them. But me, I'm not. And I never will be a perfect student because of the way that my brain is. And again, that's fine. That's actually fine. Because what it's all about really, what locking in it really is all about, is looking at yourself as a person and thinking, what can I improve about this? Not what can I reach to perfection, what can I improve? If you have the mindset of practice makes perfection, you're constantly in the mindset of, if I don't do this, if I don't do this right, then I am a failure. Whereas if you look at perfection makes progress, you're in the mindset of, oh, I'm doing better at this than I once was. It's not perfected, surely, but it's better than it was before. And I think that's what we really need to look at when thinking about locking in and really improving ourselves as people. I think that is it. I think that is all I want to talk about. So, thank you very much for watching. This is my first video. I have no idea how, you know, it's going to do, or if I'll want to do something similar to this again. Thank you for watching. I may do this more often, possibly, maybe, I don't know. Thank you. And I will see you in the next one, possibly, if there is a next one. Okay, bye. Mwah.